And welcome on into another edition of Who Wore It Best, our summer series here on STL Sports Central. We're going through all the numbers 0 through 99. You've already seen we're already into the teens now with these numbers, looking at some of the greatest athletes in St. Louis sports history and going number by number to see who wore it best. And we wrap up the second series, the second part of this series. We're on number 19. Mike Claiborne, Bernie Miklasz here with you. I'm Joe Roderick. And guys, this is one that I got to be honest, when we were making the list and putting the list together, we forgot a good one. But I think when you think of number 19s in St. Louis sports history, I know on the list we had Tom Pagnozzi, a Gold Glove winning catcher. You had Jay Bouwmeester, one of the best defensemen of all time, and a Stanley Cup winner. But the one that I omitted from the list, and Claibs you caught, was Brendan Shanahan, another guy that's on the list and makes this number one that's up for debate.
Well, I don't know if it's up for debate because I think Shanny's got this one locked up. When you said Joe Bouwmeester, you meant one of the greatest Blues defensemen, or just greatest defenseman?
I mean, when you look at the accolades that he had, and you look at the awards and the championships that he won at every single level that he played in, I guess maybe not best, maybe most decorated, I should say.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it that way because he had at one point the longest streak of players who were still playing that hadn't won the cup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if Bern, you may remember him coming out of junior. He wore the number 4 because he skated like Bobby Orr. Offensively, it was nothing he couldn't do, but when he got to the NHL, the support wasn't there for him, and he became relegated to just being a good skating defenseman. You throw him out with Parayko, and all of a sudden now you have two of the best skating defensemen playing at the same time. And, had the injuries and the heart not slowed him down, who knows, he might still be playing. But I think Brendan Shanahan, when you think about his impact in St. Louis, and then he goes on to win a couple of cups elsewhere, but when he was here, there wasn't a better power forward in the game.
I agree with that. And I agree with what you were talking about, Brendan Shanahan, both of you guys. But listen, the one thing about Bouwmeester, and he had a couple of injuries in St. Louis, especially that hip, that I think actually carried over into the 2018-19 season, but he got well, and he was absolutely fantastic in the playoffs, him and Parayko. I just wanted to look that up, but he was never a goal scorer really, but he had 7 assists that postseason, and him and Parayko just shut down everybody. And so Jay Bouwmeester's impact on the Blues actually still lives on with Colton Parayko, because I think he taught Parayko a lot of things. So I got a lot of respect for Jay Bouwmeester, and he gets credit, for being a main player on the only Stanley Cup winning team. But I'm with Claibs on this one, in that Brendan Shanahan was just a great player for the Blues. He had, I think his first season he scored 33, then he had back-to-back 50-goal seasons. Some people might say, well, they never won anything in the postseason. It wasn't his fault, because he averaged over a point per game as a Blue in the postseason. I mean, Claibs, I'm just going to repeat what you said. During that time, there was not a more prominent or more dominant power forward in the National Hockey League. And I think Shanahan also, I think it's important to factor in things like this. The fans loved him, absolutely loved him. He was very, very popular. He sort of became the new favorite, I would say. And also, nobody cares about the media, and I get that, but he was also a great face of the Blues as far as, doing a lot of the media stuff, which I think served that franchise very, very well. And I know on a personal level, we also all appreciated that. But Brendan Shanahan, great player, really a great player. I wish his time in St. Louis had lasted a little longer. The only other, just before we, get back to some other things, but I will give a tip of the cap to Tom Pagnozzi, because here's a guy that at a time where the Cardinals weren't, except for 96, they weren't all that great. He won 3 Gold Gloves, which is nothing to sneeze at. And he made an all-star team. And listen, he was offensively challenged. He'd be the first guy to tell you that. But he was one of the better Cardinals in terms of doing the job that was the most important part of his job. So I wanted to show some respect to him.
You know, I'm thinking about Shanahan. I think he was the first player to score 50 goals, have 100 points, and have 200 minutes in penalties. That may not ever happen again. And remember, he was chasing it. The last regular season game at the old arena is when Keith Kachuk high-sticked him. And he was laying on the table, cut below his nose. And the story was Kelly Chase went in and looked at him, and he was a mess. And so Shanny's trying to talk to him. He said, well, how's it look? He said, I got good news and bad news. He said, what's the bad news? He said, you look a mess. He said, well, what's the good news? He said, boy, chicks for chaser.
There you go. There you go.
And he chased Kachuk in the third period, and he needed like 4 minutes or 2 minutes in penalties to get to 200. And he just grabbed Kachuk and, gave him a good going over in order to get his. And I think he's still the only one. Because nobody fights worth 200 minutes in penalties. And if you fight that much, it definitely means you're not a goal scorer.
Do you think, as you look at, because Shanahan only a Blue for 4 years, Pagnozzi played his entire career here in St. Louis. If the Cardinals were better, if Pagnozzi was in a different era, do you think his time is looked at a little differently? Because right now, when you think Cardinals catchers, you think defense, and because of Matheny, because of Yachty, what they have done for the last 25 years behind the plate for the Cardinals. Yeah. But this is, you did have that Gold Glove catcher before that too.
He wasn't in that category in what they did as far as catching, and it was hard to say because he won Gold Gloves, but they were in a different category. Matheny might have been the best bad ball blocker you'll ever see. Yachty did a whole lot of things better than anybody else. And Yachty swung the bat a little bit better than Pagnozzi. But, he might have been looked at a little differently. But, man, there's some high goal standards that have been set already by Matheny and Yachty. And then think about Ted Simmons, who's as great of an offensive catcher as we've ever seen. He was part of that bunch, too. So, he is certainly a considerable honorable mention is where I would put him.
That's a perfect way to put it. But no, he doesn't. All due respect to Pags, because I do respect him, but he wasn't in a category with these other guys, Simmons and Matheny, and certainly not Molina. It's just, but he did a good job at a time where they needed a catcher to do a good job. I mean, he was before Matheny, and the Cardinals were. He was there catching when Anheuser-Busch was starting to pull out of baseball and cut payroll, so they didn't have much of a chance to win. I certainly wouldn't put that on him. Matheny and Molina, were on teams that had a much, much, much better chance to win, and they did a hell of a job. And Molina's in a class of his own. Even Ted Simmons would tell you that. If we're talking defense, I mean, we're talking Pudge Rodriguez, then Molina. There's after that. I mean, there's just nobody. It's I wouldn't actually subject any of these other guys to ridicule by somehow trying to compare them to Molina. Not that we're doing that, but I'm just saying that's a whole different galaxy.
Well, there's your debate on number 19. Let us know your thoughts. How much do you weigh in the Stanley Cup year of 2019 with Jay Bouwmeester, and how does that compare to Brendan Shanahan's career here in St. Louis? We want to hear from you. Leave your comments below. Reply to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever it is that you reach out to us here at STL Sports Central. We want to hear from you as the debate goes on, as we look through all 100 numbers and find out who we think wore it best here in St. Louis sports history. For Mike Claiborne and Bernie Miklasz, I'm Joe Roderick. Talk to you next time.